Is it important that we remember the past? Is it important that we remember history, personal histories, or the history of humanity? Should it matter to us where we've come from or what it's taken for us to get here? Maybe not. But if we do not understand where we've come from, are we not just leaves that do not understand that we've come from the trees? If history was told in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. So here is a story I hope you will not forget. There's no clear beginning or ending, so I think it's safe to start in the middle. In the summer of 2007, I had just graduated high school and was packing up my belongings to go to university. While sorting through my things, trying to decide what I was going to keep and what I would let go as a part of my past, I came across a photo. In it, a young girl I did not recognize. I asked my mom who she is. "That's your cousin Marion," she says. My family tends to use the term cousin loosely, and I had many other things on my mind, so my investigation ended there and I tossed the photo into the letting go pile. 6 months later, with a semester of college under my belt, I sat in my dorm room one evening staring at my computer screen. I was feeling particularly lonely and homesick that night. For the past 25 minutes, I'd been refreshing my internet browser, hoping to see a Facebook message pop up from my ex-boyfriend. On about my 43rd page refresh, a message did pop up. At first, I was disappointed to see that it wasn't from him, but I was struck with curiosity when I noticed that the message was sent by a name I didn't know, but one that felt familiar. Marion Parseyan. That was my mother's maiden name, spelled differently.
Hi, from France. I don't know if you will understand that, but I was searching people on Facebook when I find my little cousin in America, and I really hope that I am not wrong about the person. Sorry for my English.
This was Marion, the girl from the photo I disregarded. After browsing through her profile photos, I realized that she was not a little girl, but she seemed to be my age. And in some ways, I even felt that she looked like me. Almost like we could be sisters. We enthusiastically exchanged messages, and within a few months, I booked a ticket to Marseille, France. It was one of the least thought out plans I had ever made. A gut reaction, really. Something very strong was calling me. An invisible bond was pulling me toward her. I stayed with Marion and her family for almost 2 weeks. Although my mother was born in France, I didn't speak any French myself. Marion and her brother spoke basic English, so it wasn't too difficult to communicate simple ideas. At times, Marion would get frustrated and explain to me that there's so many things she would like to talk to me about. She explains that she loves to talk, but she feels so limited by our language barrier. There's almost something sad about that. Something that makes my heart ache when she says it to me. But then she makes a joke and we both laugh. Laughter. Something universal that we both share and understand. Her family takes me to visit the home my mother grew up in Marseille. I realized I had never even wondered before this moment what kind of place my mom grew up in. And even a few months ago, I never would have guessed I would be standing on the same ground she stood on as a little girl. One warm evening, Marion's mother makes a seafood salad. We eat it together as a family on their porch under the bougainvillea flowers. All 4 of them speak in French to each other. I can't understand what they're saying, but I can tell that they're telling stories, and occasionally talking about how they are worried I might feel left out. I smile and listen. The language is beautiful to me, and I enjoy watching them interact. Marion's father pours himself a glass of orange wine. He's a big, tough-looking man, but his voice is gentle and sweet. He carefully pulls the glass toward him and looks me in the eye. He knows almost no English, and he says something to me in French. His eyes seem to sparkle with what might be tears. I quickly look at Marion for translation, but she's looking at her father. He repeats himself, and this time she translates. He says our grandfathers might cry from happiness if they could see us together. After that, I'm not the only one who quietly eats their dinner. Now I can explain what some might consider to be the beginning of the story. This is current Armenia, homeland of my grandmother and grandfather's families. It's located in Western Asia with Iran to the south and Turkey to the west. In the early 1900s, my great-grandfather, Am Armenian, was living in Kütahya in modern-day Turkey. He worked as a clerk for a German railway company, and they were working on bringing a railroad through Turkey. Adam married an Armenian girl named Gulizar Hagazian. It is well known throughout my family that Gulizar had a wonderful sense of humor. She enjoyed telling funny stories, and she was particularly fond of practical jokes. a trait she would later pass on to her son, my grandfather, and his daughter, my mother, and I like to think that that sense of humor was later passed on to me. Gulazar and Adam had 4 children, Stepan, Simon, Mary, and the youngest, my grandfather, Krikor. Life in Kütahya was simple, life was happy, and life was good. In 1915, something would change. April 24th, 1915 marks the beginning of an event so horrific it haunts the minds of Armenians around the world today. It is likely, however, that you may not be familiar with this particular historic event, as it has been referred to as the slaughter you know next to nothing about. It is important to understand that Armenia is located in a region of great ethnic and religious diversity, which has been the source of tension and conflict for hundreds of years. Armenia's history and culture is deeply rooted in the Christian religion, as it was the first nation to adopt Christianity as a state religion in 301 CE. In the 17th century, however, Armenia was under the rule of the Ottoman Turks, who had established a multinational state that included several ethnic and religious groups. The Ottoman Empire controlled much of Southeast Europe, Western Asia, the Caucasus, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa. Under Ottoman rule, Armenians, along with other ethnic minorities, were treated as second-class citizens. Although they were granted religious freedom, they were subject to other discriminatory laws that prevented them from holding positions in government and forced them to pay extra taxes. During the mid-1800s, some Armenians began to protest and demand equal rights. Eventually, in the late 19th century, the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II responded to these protests by ordering a massacre of the Armenians. From the time period of 1894 to 1896, over 100,000 Armenians were killed in villages throughout the Ottoman Empire. In 1908, a new political group formed called the Young Turks. This group of determined junior officers of the Turkish army believed in a more modern constitutional government. They overthrew the Sultan and forced him to guarantee equal rights for all citizens living under the empire, no matter what their religion may be. At last, there seemed to be a beacon of light, hope for the future. But not even a year passed before 3 nationalistic members of the Young Turks seized full control of the government. They acted as dictators and expressed their plans to create a new, grander Turkish empire with one language and one religion. The main obstacle the Turkish nationalists faced in the realization of their vision of a Turkified empire were the 2 million Armenians living in their historic Armenian homeland in the center of the empire. When Turkey entered World War I, they sided with the Central Powers, and the Turkish military accused Armenians of being a potential threat should they ever decide to join forces with Russia. So while the rest of the world was preoccupied with the war, Turkey seized the opportunity to systematically expel and massacre Armenians living under the empire. April 24, 1915 marks the beginning of the first genocide of the 20th century. On April 24th, several hundred Armenian leaders, intellectuals, professors, artists, and doctors in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, were arrested and executed by the Turkish military. In the following months, the interior minister of the Ottoman Empire, Talat Pasha, legalized the deportation of any and all Armenians under the pretext that they were being relocated for their own safety. The Armenian men were rounded up and executed, and the women, children, and elderly began their forced deportation from their homes. This relocation plan would reveal itself to be a death march through the vast, unforgiving desert, where they would be abandoned by the Ottoman government and condemned to an almost certain death. An estimated 75% of Armenians who marched into the Syrian desert perished. They died of starvation and dehydration. Turkish soldiers were given permission to steal whatever they wanted and to kill whomever they pleased. The women were sexually abused and raped, and any Armenian who stopped to rest or slow down the march was beaten until he rejoined or died. Between the years of 1915 and 1923, an estimated 1.5 million Armenians were massacred. Today, you can still find the remains of genocide victims scattered across the Syrian desert. With the 100th anniversary of the genocide approaching, I took the opportunity to visit my family in New England and collect their stories. My Aunt Ani showed me around the Armenian community in Watertown. She took me to Armenian markets and an Armenian bazaar, where I ate delicious food and watched the youth perform some traditional dances. During the years of the genocide, many Armenians who were fortunate enough to survive fled the country, and in the process of leaving, many were separated from their family members. Although most Armenians died during the death marches, those who survived and made it to other countries had hoped that they would find their missing loved ones. In the publishing office of the Armenian Weekly, we read from old newspaper classifieds of people calling out for information on missing family members.
This was in 1917, so the genocide was still ongoing here. And the newspaper, the Armenian version, which is this, was founded in 1899. Here's another one. Looking for Haygazan Holgrosian from Yerzanga. 4 months ago, he came to Denver, Colorado. He's been missing for the past 4 weeks. Those who know his address, please contact us. We're looking for Hovannes Mardirosyan. He's from Mush. We believe he's in the Detroit area. We're looking for Ardashes Gamalmazian, also from Yerzanga. We believe he's in the New York area. And right after the genocide or during the genocide, people who were arriving, they were either looking for loved ones who had moved here earlier, or just looking for, their loved ones who had escaped and come here. So you see a lot of this in this newspaper.
My grandfather's family was one of the few families that escaped Turkey before they would be forcibly removed from their homes. My great-grandfather Adam was warned by his superior working on the German railway that he had heard whispers of an extermination under the guise of a deportation, and that no Armenian would be safe. Within a week, my grandfather's family quickly fled the country, and for the next several years, they would be in search of a permanent home. They moved from Albania to Greece, and each time, they would have to start life over again, a new language and a new struggle to make a living. These are redwood trees. Some of these trees are over 1,000 years old. Each mature tree will produce 100,000 cones per year, and each of those cones contains about 100 seeds. The cones dry in low humidity weather and release their seeds, which fall to the ground. Less than 5% of these seeds will survive and become seedlings, and most of those seedlings will die due to drought or fungal infections. It is only the most resilient seeds and the most fortunate seeds that are placed just perfectly into the proper conditions at just the right moment that manage to survive. While my great-grandfather's family was living in Greece, they did not have much money, and they did not always have access to clean food and water. Cholera was widespread at the time, and 3 of his children contracted the disease. All of them died, except for my grandfather, Krikor. Determined to start over again after the tragic death of their children, my great-grandparents eventually joined the thousands of genocide survivors living in the port city of Marseille, France. After moving to France, Adam and Gulizar had another child, Mardiros, Krigor's new baby brother. Mardiros would one day become my cousin Marion's grandfather. That evening, when Marion's father spoke of our grandfathers, I did not understand what had moved him so deeply. And it was not until I understood this part of the story and what had happened to my grandfather's siblings that I understood his tears. After my great-grandparents decided they would stay in France, they made a promise to each other that although they had spoken Turkish their whole lives, they would make sure that their children would speak, read, and write in Armenian. Life was safer in France, but it was not easy. Adam died a few years after settling down in Marseille, leaving Gulizar and her 2 sons alone. France was welcoming to Armenian refugees, but they struggled to get proper citizenship. When World War II broke out in France, the government granted immediate citizenship to any resident who joined the army. Krikor joined at the age of 23. Unfortunately, his entire battalion was captured at the Belgian border, and he spent the rest of the war as a prisoner. He was moved from camp to camp, he endured harsh conditions and hunger. After years in prison, Krikor was released and joined his family back in France. In 1948, he met his future wife, my grandmother, Nuritsa Garebian. Nuritsa's family was also made up of genocide survivors. Both of her uncles had been murdered by Turkish soldiers, and the rest of her family had struggled to make it safely out of the empire. I discovered this photo of my grandmother's family, among others, while I was visiting my family in New England. My grandmother is not in the photo because she was not born yet. Many dark and tragic things happened during the genocide, and even those who can remember the stories tend not to speak of them. Some things are just too painful to remember, and some stories are a wound they dare not reopen. While interviewing various family members, I came across a story I had not heard before. I unintentionally stumbled upon a story that I had been protected from for so many years. You see, in this photo, there is a baby. To the best of my knowledge, my grandmother had only one brother and one sister. When I asked about the baby, I immediately knew what I had done. During their efforts to escape the genocide, my grandmother's family traveled far across the desert, sometimes alone and sometimes with other families. At the time, there was my grandmother's father, her mother, her sister, her brother, her grandmother, and a third child, the infant in this photo. Just to be Armenian in this time was risky, and if you found yourself in the path of the wrong people, you very well could pay with your life.
My grandmother had a baby boy, and at some point when the massacre started and it came to the village, people would flee at night, so that nobody would see them go, otherwise they'd kill them. They left, and at night they would hide in caves. And typically there'd be other Armenians who were fleeing and hiding in those caves at night. But there was patrols all the time and people looking for them, so they had to be very quiet. And they couldn't light anything or do anything. They would just huddle together. One night, when they were fleeing, the little baby started to cry and wouldn't stop crying. And they couldn't get the baby to stop crying. And they were afraid that at some point, it's gonna attract the Turks. So someone else spoke to my grandfather and pleaded with him. He said, "We have to silence the baby, because if we don't, they're going to kill everybody."
Get someone's coming. So all the kids be quiet, 3, 5-year-old, okay, quiet. Can't tell baby to be quiet.
So they took the baby from my grandmother, who was holding him, and they suffocated him. But there's nothing they could have done. I mean, I do understand that if there was 30 or 35 people in that cave and a lot of children, but it's just a horrible way for a mother to watch it happen. So that always stayed with me, because I felt bad for my grandmother.
The saddest part of the story is years later, the family escapes, the rest of them get to France. In Marseille, Sirpui is in hospital. I mean, decades later. Sirpui's there, she's in the hospital, she's dying. And I think your Nen is there, my Nen is there. And with her last breath, and loud, just emphatically cries the baby's name, and dies. And to me, you carry that around for decades.
It wasn't until my grandmother's family eventually escaped Syria and moved to an Armenian refugee camp in Marseille, France, that my grandmother, Nuritsa, was born. After Krikor and Nuritsa were married, they had 3 daughters, my mother, Bridget, and her 2 sisters, Ani and Mimi. In the 60s, my mother's family decided to take one final voyage across the sea and into America to join other family members and search for new opportunities. My mother and her sisters grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts. Although they spent the majority of their lives in America, they held on tightly to their Armenian roots. Today, both of my aunts are political activists for the Armenian cause. In 1988, my mom married my dad, and when I was born, they gave me the Armenian name Datev. In Massachusetts, we lived in a house with my grandmother and aunt. Some of my fondest memories of my grandmother are ones of her teaching me, in broken English, how to make Armenian food. My mother's sisters always made sure that my brother and I knew that we were Armenian. As a little girl, I really felt that was something to be proud of. I didn't quite understand what being Armenian was, but I felt like it meant that I was part of a very special family, with an unbreakable bond, and in a way that was true. When the Ottoman Empire began its massacre of the Armenians, they set out to destroy an ancient people. They wanted to strip over 1 million individuals of their dignity and identity. They wanted to erase Armenians from the memory of the world. One of the most painful facts facing Armenians today is that, as of the year 2015, the Turkish government denies that the Armenian genocide ever happened. They acknowledge that during World War I many Armenians died, but they say the massacres were committed by both sides as a result of interethnic violence. Despite the sheer scale of the death toll, the countless photographs, eyewitness accounts, and newspaper articles, despite the fact that the denial of the genocide is outlawed in Switzerland, Slovakia, and Greece, Turkey continues to deny the Armenian genocide. Turkish students are taught that the genocide is a myth, and Turkish writers who recognize the genocide are prosecuted. For many Armenians, the pain caused by the genocide continues through the denial from the Turkish government, for they deny Armenians even the memory of the murders of their relatives. Today, although there are only 3 million Armenians living in modern-day Armenia, nearly 8 million Armenians live in other countries around the world. Perhaps it is a result of knowing that their culture was almost destroyed, but it seems that even Armenians outside of Armenia fight to preserve their traditions. There are Armenian festivals, summer camps, organizations, and once a year on April 24th, thousands of Armenians gather in different cities around the world to commemorate the events of the genocide and protest its denial.
If you look at Armenia from ancient times to where it is today, to say where are you from, and my grandparents were not from today's Armenia. The borders have changed hundreds of times over the past centuries. Whether it was the Persians, the Romans, the Turks, the Soviets. My grandparents can't say I'm from Armenia, but they're Armenian, and so I think that Armenians are in the heart, and it's what you believe, it's how you feel. That's what makes you Armenian, and that's where you're from. I'm Armenian because I have it here.
I have visited with my cousin Marianne several times after that first trip in college. She came to America for the first time to see me, and I visited her again in France. Although upon our first meeting I immediately formed a bond with her, the bond has grown for me the more I have understood the story of our families. In some ways, as Marianne and I grow closer, I feel as if we are mending the wounds inflicted upon a family torn apart by a genocide. Although I was young when my grandfather died, I do feel like it would make him smile to see Marianne and I together. I can't help but think about the difficulties that my relatives faced and how hard they have fought to survive, and wonder why I've been so fortunate to have been born under these conditions in just the right place at precisely the right time. But then I remember that I am a storyteller, and it is my job to tell their story. So here's their story, and I hope you will not forget it.
Last year, it's an Armenian apricot tree. Datev and I planted it one Sunday when her grandfather was sick in the hospital. We planted it for him.